So this video is going to focus on swapping out the speedometers in the Mustang cluster. Here, kind of showing some of the options that are available here. For specific years, especially 87 and 88 and some 89s, you're stuck with the 85 mile-an-hour speedometer. And this isn't really ideal for most of you because obviously you're going to go at speeds faster than 85 miles an hour. You may want to swap it out to a 140 unit or even a aftermarket Ford Motorsport or a certified SSP speedometer. But this video is going to show you how to disassemble a cluster to swap the speedometer. It's actually very easy. I can also go into, later on in the video, the steps needed to adjust the speedometer to match your mileage. Some folks here may not care about that because their speedometers rolled over, their odometers rolled over so many times that nobody even knows the true mileage. In that case, just swap it and send it and don't worry about it. But some folks may want to try to keep their mileage somewhat the same. So towards the end of the video, I'll go through how to do that with one of these speedometers. But we're going to go ahead and show you how to swap out the speedometer. In this case, I already have a 140 unit installed. Many of you watching this may have an 85 mile-an-hour unit that you want to install. But some of you may also be wanting to swap out to a Motorsport unit. Now, before we go into how to swap the speedometer, just please note that there are 2 year spans that are associated with the speedometers. Here on the table, we're looking at the 87 to 89 version, and that's quite evident by the fact that we have a flat hump along the bottom here. You also notice that the speedometers here are actually quite squared off on the bottom as well. Your 90 to 93 speedometer has a little bit of a hump cut out here, and that's because of the airbag column. So please note that if you have an 87 to 89 speedometer cluster like you see here, you need to find a specific 87 to 89 140 mile-an-hour speedometer. You can't just buy any one, it needs to be specific. In this case here, these are all 87 to 89 units. I'll insert a photo of some of the 90 to 93 units for comparison. So step one, as you can imagine, is to get the cluster out of the car. You're not going to be able to do this in the car, you need to remove it. But for the sake of expediting and to remove this cover here, we're going to remove 6 of these particular screws here. Now these are 5.5 millimeter or T15 Torx. You can use either to remove it. And you're going to have 2 here, 2 here, and 2 here. At that point you can remove the lens. Now you're going to have 2 more of those same screws in these 2 corners here. You want to pay attention to these 2 rubber bumpers here. As you disassemble it, these tend to fall off, so you don't want to lose those. So if you want, you can remove them now if they're not firmly attached. This one is not, and put that aside. Now, once those 2 screws are removed, this cluster is going to come apart in a couple layers here. You have your outer plastic shell, put that aside, and then you have this inner metal plastic trim. Carefully pull that up and you can put that aside. From here you'll see that this speedometer is actually starting to come out. Now the way it comes out, these are somewhat sandwiched together. This edge here is going to lift up and away, but this gauge is here with the oil pressure and the fuel have a flap that overlaps the speedometer about 1/2 inch or so. Your first step is going to be removing the oil pressure and fuel gauge. And this actually can be wiggled out pretty easily. If you put a finger at the top and slowly pry, you can easily get that to come out. The way this one attaches is you have fingers on these gauges here and you simply press into those clips. Now you notice once I did that, the speedometer pretty much fell out. But that's all that's really holding it. So again, this is simply going to press into place. You have your 2 alignment tabs here. And if it didn't fall out, all you would do is simply grab it from the top and bottom and wiggle it out. There's not much really holding it in there. But you'll notice the way that these go together here, there's a little bit of an adhesive ridge here. And the opposite little flap on this one will overlap that slightly and may be stuck. So you may have to work that to free that. But I found that if you can't get it out, you can kind of work these two out as a section and then peel them apart later on. But we have the speedometer out. A little investigation of it. I'm going to go into more detail when I look at the odometer, but I'm going to go ahead and swap this out with another unit. So we're going to take my 140 mile an hour Ford Motorsport unit and we're going to swap this in. Now if you notice, it's exactly the same as the other unit I took out, so there's no real difference. In fact, you'll notice the 85, the 140, the Motorsport ones, and the SSP ones are all the same. The difference is some of the calibration, and I'll go into that in a little bit later on. But this is going to, the most part, install simply by pushing it in here as you see fit. And then finally, you can take this section, align the pins, and you do want to do this evenly because there's alignment posts that you need to align, and simply press that in. And that's it. Now it's just going and doing the opposite of your disassembly. So this particular trim piece will go on first. Make sure you have it correct side out. And then you're going to install your plastic cover plate. Then you'll simply put that piece on there. I'm going to go ahead and screw those two screws in. Now make sure that if you took off your rubber bumpers, that you reattach those, one there and one there. And then from here, once you've screwed those in, you're going to simply put your lens in place and reattach your 6 screws there. And that's it. You now have your new speedometer installed into your cluster. So let's talk about adjusting the odometer. Now some people don't care about the mileage on their cars. They've turned over so many times that they just simply lost track. So putting a different speedometer in with a different mileage really doesn't matter. But some folks, you may actually care. So that's why I kind of put this at the end of the video. All right, so I'm sure someone out there is going to say that it's illegal to tamper with the odometer. And from what I can see, they would be correct if the intent of tampering with the odometer was meant to deceive in the act of selling the car or any other nefarious purposes. Now, I'm not a lawyer here, I'm just an engineer, but I was able to find this little snip here about adjusting mileage. And you're free to do your own research, and I don't mean to preach or anything, but I'm just simply passing around the info, and you folks are free to do whatever you want with it. But anyway, as you've probably been reading here, it does say that in the case of a repair, that you can change the odometer to match, and actually that you should do that. Or if you can't, you should adjust the odometer to 0 or put I believe a sticker that says the actual mileage that the odometer was changed at. So technically, to be complying with the law, you're supposed to adjust the odometer or apply this sticker, and I'm pretty sure that many folks aren't doing that. But that's all I'm going to say on this. Again, you folks are free to do whatever you want. I'm just passing along info here. Now, if you're fortunate enough to purchase a Ford Motorsport speedometer back in the day, these are the instructions that were supplied with them, pretty much outlining what I'm going to do. You may be able to read these if you were to pause here, but I'm going to go through these steps right now. So on the back side of the speedometer, you'll notice that there's a pin with some white roller gears here. Now the pin is splined on one end and tapered on the other here. So what you want to do is use some sort of device to basically press the pin out in this direction. Now some of them may be firmly installed there. Some you may be able to get in there and just gently tap it out, like this one. This one I've had out before. But you're going to want to figure out a way to do that. Now the directions that are included with the Ford Motorsport kit want you to use something to support this bracket here. The thought is that if you have to use some force to drive this out, that you may cause this bracket that's right here to bend. If it were to bend, it may interfere with the white gear, and then you've screwed up your odometer. So what they state to do is to put something here to support that, and then allow you to rest it there. And then you can do what I did there. You may need a second set of hands, or again, it's a little tricky to do on camera, but you want to basically support right there on this bracket here, while you use something to push or pry and knock that down. Now you want to be careful when the pin comes out that you just don't pull the whole thing out. It's not a big deal, but these gears are a little bit of a pain to get back in. I'm going to show you one. I will slide the pin out and remove one of them. Now the gears have 8 teeth, and if you'll notice, there's a big tooth and a little tooth that alternate on here. The way this works is that there is a large gap. I'm trying to find it here for you, right there. You can see the large gap there. The big tooth is going to fit into that, and that's going to help to rotate it around when it's ready to move the next number here. Now you don't need to remove the teeth. Excuse me, you don't need to remove the white gears. You simply just need to be able to push the pin back far enough to kind of angle this up. Once you do that, you can easily free spin all of these gears here. So what I do is I hold it here, put one finger on there, put a little downward pressure on there, and you should be good to go. Now, if you rotate it, obviously rotate it this direction so that the idler gears, these white teeth here, white gears, don't fall out. But with the odometer on facing up here, you're going to adjust the mileage to what you want here. You need to kind of make sure that you get it as straight across as possible. If you set it up with the numbers offset, it will stay that way. It only takes about a 1/2 difference to make that misalignment problem. But you're going to want to go ahead and just start rotating the gears. So I'm going to go with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so it's definitely easier with 2 hands. You just simply use one hand to hold the number in place while you rotate the next one in order. But I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. And what you'll do is you'll rotate it around here, and you're going to try to pick, you're going to see the row here where it says 6, 7, 8, 0. That's where you're going to kind of want to focus on keeping that perfectly aligned while you do this next step. Your next step is going to simply be to drop the gears into the various slots here without rotating that wheel. You want your small tooth to fit down into the groove and your large tooth to be kind of next in line, ready to drop in. So you'll see here that I have large tooth, if I can get it to focus, and then small tooth, small tooth. So I need to kind of make a little bit of an adjustment here, and I'll pick the pin up and carefully rotate those teeth so that I basically have large teeth all the way across. And then what I'm going to do is try to drop that into place here by pushing down and gently wiggling the teeth into place. This part of this will take a while, so I'm not going to cut away here. I'm actually going to show me working through it a little bit. There we go, and then it just fell in. Now I think I actually lost a tooth there. You'll notice 6, 7, and 8 is way up, 9, 0. So as we flip it over there, you'll see that my 1, 2, my 3 is actually off. So I'm going to have to go back in there and adjust that one down a tooth just to align that perfectly. So to do that, again, you can see that the one I want to do is this 9. I'm actually going to hold these gears here, pull the pin back a little bit, and then see if I can rotate that one tooth just a little bit without moving these ones here, and then I'm going to try to drop that back in. Don't be surprised if this takes you several times to do this here. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, that's much, much better. And as you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this is an example of being totally misaligned. You can see here when I properly align it there that the only digit that's actually aligned correctly is the 7. So you would need to redo this. I know it looks somewhat correct on camera, but as I get the angle correct, you can see that the first 2 rows, the 2, 2, 1, is actually split where it needs to be. So these 3 numbers would actually need to rotate one tooth either direction depending on the miles. The only one that's really correct here is the 7. So if you end up with this sort of situation here, you want to go back and redo this. So there might be one situation which may be a little bit more difficult than what I previously showed. That might be situations where your mileage is rolling over to a new digit. So you can see here I have 12199 set up with the 2 coming up. Now what I did was I went ahead and removed the shaft and the gears to better show you what's going on here. I'm going to use a little light too as well. But you can see here on the top what I was talking about with the teeth with the large gaps. Let me zoom in a little bit there. Right. So the large gap is what I'm referring to as this extra slot here. That is where the large teeth for the idler will drop in. And what it'll do is it'll grab both gears and advance them forward for rolling over miles. Now there's one position where they're going to be directly across where the rod is. If we slip the rod in here, where the large gap or the large tooth fit, where it's directly under the rod, will usually be a mileage that's rolling over. The difference is here is that when you're going to insert the gear into that spot, you're going to actually slip the large tooth into that slot. So any of these large features here that will accept the large tooth, if they are directly under the rod, you're going to fit the large tooth on that idler gear into that and not the small tooth. Far more often though, that'll be somewhere else on there, so you're going to continue to drop your small teeth in. But there may be a situation once in a while where your large gap is directly under the rod. And that'll be where you're going from, for instance, 19 to 20. But you'll notice if you play around with this, wherever that large spacing lines up under the rod, you got a changeover about to occur. In this case, 69 going to 70. So if you're that close, you may want to maybe put a couple more miles on it, get to something that's in the middle of a change, or that may not be in a changeover. You know, 65 for instance. If you were to have that on your odometer, if I can spin it. If you were to have 66 for instance, you would see you do not have the large spacing anywhere near the rod, so it'll be a little bit easier for you to set up. Something to keep in mind, it may be unavoidable unfortunately if you have 119,000 miles and it's about to roll to 130, we'll call this 100 and switch this to 9. So you've got 100 and we'll call it 229,000 miles on this thing. And you'll see right there that you have your large gap at the top there. So you're just going to have to keep in mind where those are and adjust by putting the large teeth into those particular gaps. So I've gone and hooked a drill to it. I'm going to actually show you that using a drill to adjust your speedometer is pointless because it's going to take forever. So I just simply chucked it on the back here. This is a junk a speedometer like I mentioned before, so I don't really care about damaging it. You may or may not want to do this to a good one. And you're going to spin the drill counterclockwise to go in the proper motion. So this got pretty loud, so I opted to do a voiceover. But you can see with the drill running that it doesn't really tack on miles as quickly as you could think. You can see that full speed, the tenths are just slowly ticking away here. We're going to move up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 in a moment here. And then continuing on, you can see that the odometer is functioning as intended. So this is good to go and be installed. So hopefully that shows you why using a drill is kind of pointless there. At full speed, it even took a few minutes just to reel 1 mile on this thing. But that's pretty much it for adjusting your odometer. It's not very difficult at all. And like I pointed out in that little clip on laws, really, that you kind of actually are supposed to adjust your mileage when you replace your speedometer as part of a repair. So if this was a broken 140, if I were to swap, let's just say this 85 mile an hour in the unit, I would actually be required to match the odometer or put that sticker somewhere in the car. But again, I'm not going to preach, I'm just kind of giving you the info. What you do with it is up to you. Alright, so that'll do it for this video. So here's another example of one that I've done. This is the 160 unit that I have in my car. But my car has a little over 110,000 miles on it. I purchased this car 26 years ago with around 40 to 45,000 miles on it. So as far as I know, this is the accurate mileage on it. I've kept it as close as I possibly can. and there has been no discrepancies in my ownership of the vehicle. So it's important for me to kind of maintain the mileage. This may or may not be critical to you, but hopefully the steps in this video help those of you out that needed this information. Anyway, thanks for watching.